G'day folks, Chris McLean back in the studio with yet another episode. And today, all the way from sunny UK, I've got Sam Winsbury from Kurogo. And Sam at Kurogo, they help founders and CEOs all over the world build powerful personal brands online. They help them define how they're positioning themselves within the industries that they serve. They help them create content to actually grow authority and then develop PR strategies that help amplify that message. Sam, as we were talking a bit before, this is super, super important, I think, for anyone that's a founder, particularly in a digital-led, content-heavy, content-first world, even more particularly if you're trying to attract B2B clients on something like LinkedIn. Whatever social media platform you're using, content really is king these days. So how you do that and how you leverage that as an individual, as a person leading the business, I think a lot of leaders, a lot of owners, a lot of founders, and particularly, as I was saying, in the agency space, miss that piece, and they brand the business and they do all the business branding stuff that a lot of the times no one kind of really gives a shit about, because it's just agency content and blah, 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 blah. But people want to connect with people, right? Is that the essence of sort of why you focus on that personal branding piece?
Yeah, spot on. I appreciate you having me on, Chris. And yeah, absolutely. We've noticed more and more over recent years that trust is probably at its lowest, especially with agencies. I think gurus, fakes, cowboys over recent years have eroded the kind of collective trust in agencies over recent years, which is a little bit of a shame, because there are so many businesses and agencies specifically out there doing amazing work. But I think the personal interactions with people is more and more important now for actually positioning yourselves in the right way, building up or rebuilding that trust with people and showing off the amazing work that you are doing. So yeah, absolutely vital.
Yeah, I think that is a massive piece, and I've talked about it on the show quite a lot of times. Is that cowboy mentality? Unfortunately, the barrier to entry to start a digital agency or a marketing agency is super, super low. I can go and do a 3-day Facebook ads course, and suddenly I'm a Facebook ads guru, and I go out, and if I'm good at marketing, right, I can bring clients in. But there are a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that do churn and burn clients, and it gives the number of clients that we speak to where they've just been screwed over by people. They get onboarded, everyone's super excited, and then they either get palmed off to a junior who runs the accounting to the ground, or that initial excitement, and I'm working with the founders and it's all really good, and then the account just sort of sits there and nothing happens after 3 months. The number of times we hear that, it really is an issue, and it didn't used to be so much of an issue back. I mean, I founded my agency sort of 2002, early 2000s. You were small agencies and boutiques were kind of just starting to come up and play against the Saatchis and the Clemenges and the BBDOs, these massive agencies. That was a very different competitive world to now. Yeah, do an online course and suddenly I'm a marketing guru and I can launch. So how do you start to combat that as a founder? Particularly, I mean, let's talk in the agency space, because that's really who we're talking to. I know that's your background as well. How do we start to combat that as agency owners particularly?
Yeah, so yeah, we've worked with a number of agency owners previously, and the process is, there's kind of a set process that you can follow that actually tends to get the best results in that space. And I think the first thing to remember to kind of underpin everything before you even get into this is that personal branding isn't about forging a false representation of yourself. What we're doing here with personal branding is creating a more accurate representation based on the skills, the experience, the expertise, the personality, and the values that you do actually have. I think there's a massive difference between forging reputation and framing it. So it's really, really important throughout this process to remember that we are framing, and we're not kind of, this isn't an ego boosting, self-indulgent exercise to kind of big yourself up. This is actually getting really practical about what you can offer people. So really it starts with understanding that. And then once you've got into that mindset, you can start to actually position yourself as an authority within your industry, as someone that is the go-to, really clearly answering the question, why your prospects, why your potential clients would come to you over any other agency. So I think that first kind of positioning piece, which is the first thing we work on, is really, really important. Building up that kind of frame of reference and understanding why people should choose to work with you.
Yeah, I like that just that word that you used there, accuracy, an accurate representation of who I am as a business owner and a person. So a lot of the times we'll talk about authority or authenticity. I want to be authentic and I want to add value. And these are kind of terms that are a bit free and loose these days, I think, where I go in trying to be authentic and I tell my story but it's a lot of the time you're doing that as a thing, right? As you said, you're kind of forging that authenticity. It's not an accurate representation of yourself. So I really like that terminology that you're using, that an accurate representation rather than sort of pretending to be something, because that's what I think is going to get traction. How do you approach that part of? So I know that can be a really interesting point. So do I post about my life, my family, my kids, the stuff I do outside of work, or is it really about, or more about, me as the business owner and what I do in a business context and my knowledge base and skill set? How do you strike that balance to create that positioning?
Yeah, it definitely is a balance, and there's it's not black and white. It's not you've got to be talking just about the personal stuff. You've got to be talking just about the business. There is kind of a balance of the two that needs to be struck, and that will look different for different people. So I think the process of understanding that has to start with the end goal that you want to achieve. So what is the end reputation that you want to build? If you could, if you think ahead to a year's time or 5 years' time, and you were to ask any of your potential clients, or even your current clients, how they would describe you, it's important to have an understanding of kind of the ideal things that they'd be saying. You can almost create, what we typically do is we'll create a statement that lays that out, and then you have this kind of ideal representation or reputation that you're looking to get to. And that really acts as like the North Star. Everything you do from then on should be working towards getting you close to that. From that, you can start to reverse engineer the things that you need to be talking about. For example, if you want to be seen as if you want to be seen as an innovative leader within a web design space, for example, plucking a random idea, you probably need to be talking about web design, but also within that, the future of it, what it's going to look like in 10 years. And you can start to kind of reverse engineer what content will line up with these traits and these topics that you want to be known for.
Yeah, I love that. It's a really nice framework, sort of creating that future self and then sort of reverse engineering back from there. As if I'm going to become perceived as that person, what does that look like? What would that person talk about? I think that's a really useful model. Use that a lot of times in goal setting and planning and business growth of who do I want to become, rather than I want to make $1 million. That's one, but who is the person that makes that $1 million? Sort of, I want to become a known authority in my industry. Who is that person? What do they do? Even how important is embodying that thing as well? So if I want to be represented as a 7-8-figure leader, innovative leader in that space, I obviously need to present that way, right? And dress a certain way and step into that persona a bit. So do you go into that physical aspect, I suppose, of how do I physically look? What haircut do I have? Like, what clothes do I wear? What does my background kind of look like? Because all of this is brand, right? All of this, the lighting and the books on the shelf and how I present in a meeting and video, that's all encompasses brand, right? So do you go into all of that sort of detail as well, or do you find that kind of naturally comes out when you create that North Star?
It's slightly more natural, but it's something that people do need to consider, because what a lot of people do is they'll think personal brand, they kind of go straight to, I'll put a few posts out on LinkedIn and kind of presume that is a brand, but actually a personal brand extends far beyond that and really is carried with you in any interaction you have. That might be a podcast appearance or a podcast show like this. It might be with a conversation with a potential client. It might even be in a conversation with a current client. Your personal brand is still kind of present and active and important in all of those situations. And it's important that it's consistent across those. It's very difficult to build reputation without repetition. It requires you kind of repeating the same messages, and however subtle they may be, you need to repeat those over and over and over again and keep it consistent over a long period of time, for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love that. And as a personal brand, wherever I show up, literally wherever I as a person show up, that I'm representing my brand. And if today I show up and I've got a suit jacket on and tomorrow I've got a hoodie and a beanie on, that's a different brand, right? I'm giving a different message. So do you, and again, we talk like if we were doing branding for a business, we would look at what their aesthetic, what they look like, but their tone of voice, the words they use, how they communicate, their communication style, all of that thing. Is that something that you kind of lay out for someone? Is this, you sort of put it into like a playbook of like, this is how you need to speak, this is your tonality, this is the expectation of tone of voice? Do you go to that level of detail in this process?
Yeah, exactly. So once we've built that kind of positioning statement out, that ideal reputation that you want to build, as I said, we essentially reverse engineer everything off the back of that, and we use that as almost a cross checker, if you like, and we can kind of say, right, if we need to get to this end stage, or we want to show this representation of you, what's the kind of tone that we need to talk in? What sort of things do we need to speak about? What sort of traits do we need to show? What visual aesthetic needs to match your brand? And all of these things you can cross check against it, and it almost, having that end goal almost takes away the question mark or the uncertainty around it. Even when it comes down to a piece of content, there's probably loads of agencies out there right now that are sitting on mountains and mountains of value, but just aren't sharing it and aren't building their reputation with it because they're wondering, is this something I should be talking about? Should I share this? Is this, too business focused, too personal focused? But if you have that end goal and you know the exact topics, the traits, the tone that you need to be speaking in, you can just cross check it. And if they line up, that topic lines up, that tone lines up, then it's, chances are it's something that you should be posting. So got to go into all of those details and be really, really clear on how everything lines up, for essentially using that as stepping stones, basically. Kind of everything you publicize is a stepping stone towards getting to this end positioning.
Yeah, really good. So we're saying you got a checklist, right? Like, do I do this, or do I do content A or content B? Well, this is 3 out of 5 and this is 5 out of 5, so I'll do that one because it aligns more with all the stuff I've laid out. So let's move into that piece next. So I've got my positioning, I know who I am, how I'm representing, what my brand aesthetic is. Now I've got to go create content. What does that process start to look like, that marketing piece? So I know what I'm positioning as, that marketing content piece, content creation. Again, this is time, this is effort, this is energy. How do we start to go about that, creating valuable content as well? So it's not just churning out a bunch of crap, but putting out stuff that's actually going to resonate, be interesting, have some sort of engagement to it, but that's what we're talking about with value, right? Again, value based and value content is something that has been kind of thrown around a lot, like authenticity and value. It's kind of these terms that get thrown about. What does that value proposition in terms of content look like for you?
Yeah, so content is the engine really of your personal brand. It's every time you put a piece of content out there, it's like a footprint for you. So really, really important to get it right. And I think it starts with understanding obviously what's going to get you to that end positioning goal, but also considering what do you need to post to get to that reputation? What do your audience need to see from you in order to see you someone as someone that they trust, someone that they'd be willing to buy from, someone that they want to work with? And basically formulating that, and also probably what you're interested in as well. We all have, every agency out there will have a unique combination of skills or expertise or experience or interest that nobody else can compete with, right? Because the chances of it being exactly the same from one agency to another are so small. So it makes sense to lean on that as well. Actually using your areas of interest, your areas of curiosity is actually really, really powerful, because then you're able to produce content that actually nobody else is going to produce to that level. So it's a balance of what you need to show for yourself, what your audience needs to see, and what you're really, really passionate about. Once you have those kind of three areas that you're going to be talking about, there's a couple of things that you need to do, right? I'm going to presume, for argument's sake, that any agency owner looking to build their personal brand probably wants to generate business from it, and it's not a self-indulgent ego play, but it's actually to grow their business. There's kind of three core things really that you need to do. You need to grow your audience. There, you're essentially increasing the pool of potential people that would be interested in what you're doing. You're putting yourself in a better position. You're giving yourself a higher chance of getting clients. The second thing you need to do is actually build trust with them. Show them that you know what you're talking about. You're not a fake. You're not a cowboy. You're not a guru of the old days. You haven't just bought probably a $997 course and proclaimed to be an expert. So that's the second phase, building up trust with your existing audience. And that style of content is less focused on landing you in front of new people. This is just building trust and building that relationship with your existing audience. And then the final type is around converting those people. That might be converting them from a LinkedIn connection to a podcast viewer. It might be from a podcast viewer to a newsletter subscriber, or a newsletter subscriber to a client. Whatever that conversion category is, it's important that you are actually giving people that nudge that they need to go on and do that. So you can kind of split the content types that you put out into those three buckets.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And in terms of, obviously, we're all super busy, particularly as agency owners. We're some of the busiest people on the planet. How do I go about creating that content? Do you talk about sort of batching content, like let's just get 2 hours a month aside and just batch out 60 pieces of content? How do you do you sort of talk about that aspect, or how do you actually start to create this content and pull it together?
Yeah, massive issue. Everyone's time poor, right? But I think personally, I find batch producing is the way forward. Certainly for me and a lot of people we work with, batch producing works well. What I do is dedicate the time to produce something that's long form and put a little bit more time and effort into long form. I mean, podcast is a perfect example. If you record a podcast every month or every couple of weeks, that's a great basis to work from, because I can pretty much guarantee if you spend 15, 30, 60 minutes on a podcast, you're going to be able to turn that into at least 30 to 60 pieces of content by repurposing it. So I think if time is an issue, I would actually, it sounds counterintuitive, but if you're short for time, produce long form, because then it'll pay dividends when you come to produce all of your short form content. You can just chop it up, repurpose bits. You could take a podcast, for example, turn it into a blog post. You could publish the audio on podcast platforms, video on YouTube. You could cut those videos into shorts. They can go across YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. You can turn those shorts into LinkedIn posts. You can turn the LinkedIn posts into tweets. And very quickly, from one half-an-hour video podcast, you've got a whole month's worth of content. And I think that distribution is underappreciated. A lot of people go to the time and effort of producing really, really good content, but then they'll just leave it on a blog that gets 100 visitors a month and don't make the most of it. So repurposing and distribution pieces is massive, because I think, do you think the catch there is people think, I don't want to put the same thing everywhere, because I'm assuming everyone that's following me on every platform, but that's not really the case, right? You might follow me on LinkedIn, but you're not on my Instagram. So if I don't post there, I'm missing all the people that aren't, I guess, cross-pollinated across social. So that's why you can repurpose and post the same thing with maybe a different format, repurposed for Reels versus for Instagram versus for LinkedIn. Maybe I've got to change the context of that, or maybe it's a quote for Twitter, right? But that same content could go out across multiple platforms and hit many more people. Do you find that that's a stumbling block for people? Like, I don't want to post everywhere because it's going to be too repetitive, perhaps? It's important, I think, to remember that different people prefer to consume different forms of content. So I think if you can cover yourself across all bases, that's great. Also important to remember that people forget very, very easily. I couldn't even tell you what I posted on, and I posted it myself. I couldn't tell you what I posted on LinkedIn yesterday. We see so many pieces of content, and there's so many things that everyone has to remember each day that very quickly we forget these things. So, I wouldn't worry about the fear of coming across repetitive. Maybe if you're saying, if you're reusing the same podcast for 6 months in a row, maybe it's worth considering producing a new one. In terms of the messaging, that messaging needs to be repeated consistently. You can't build reputation without repeating similar messages over and over again.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Because again, I know we were talking about our shared mate, Oliver Duffy Lee, another amazing agency coach. And a lot of the content that I've seen him produce, he's got one message. For a long time, it's about one thing being repeated. And you see this with the guru and Tony Robbins. When he's talking about one thing, he'll talk about that one thing for a year or 6 months, and that's that one message. So I think that's a really critical thing, is that saying the same thing over and over and over is actually kind of necessary. You don't want to be like, I'm talking about marketing one week, and then I'm talking about Facebook strategy one week, and then it's LinkedIn strategy, and then it's Instagram, and then I'm talking about business growth, and then I'm talking about finances. Like, that's a really mixed brand message. If I'm talking about TikTok, I want to talk about TikTok and be the TikTok guy for a year, so people associate me with that thing, right? And I want to find maybe nuanced ways of talking about that same thing, but having that consistency of message over time. I think that's something that can get. I think I've fallen into the trap myself, where you want to be fresh and you want to do new stuff all the time, but maybe that comes off as confusing.
Yeah, certainly. It is confusing. It's about taking the same message and resharing it in new and creative ways. That's the underlying message has got to be the same. That doesn't mean you have to post the exact same copy on LinkedIn every single week, but you want to be sharing a similar message in a different way, present it in a new way, reformat it. There's lots of different ways that you can say the same thing, basically. So channel all of that creative thinking into how can I present this idea in a different way rather than what new ideas can I come up with.
Yeah. So you sort of pick a topic and stay in the lane of that topic for as long as long as you can, or as long as that thing is still relevant. I think another. Sorry, go.
I was just going to say something I'd quite like to do is just pick 5 beliefs around your industry that you will defend to your grave. 5 things that you really, really stand for. You don't sit on the fence with them. You really take a stance on them, and just use those 5 things as the key things that you're going to repeat over and over again. And then, if you're saying one of those things, if one of those ideas is present in your content, then it's reinforcing that message.
Yeah, love that. Again, having a framework, having something that I can reference and go, do I do this or do I do that? Takes that decision out. Like, okay, I'm doing content today, and I know I'm going to talk about one of these 5 things. Okay, I've got an idea about this thing that ticks the box. Let's just talk about that thing. I think that can be having those frameworks and taking the decision out of it, taking the thinking out of it. I think is massive for getting a good volume of content out. I think, again, I've experienced it myself. I know a lot of people do experience where you overanalyze and what am I going to talk about? And it's these 5 things. Pick one and just shoot the video, talk about it, write the tweet, and then repurpose it. A great example at the moment, who everybody's talking about, is Alex Hormozi. Does a shit ton of content. He's everywhere. Apparently he spends about $70,000 a month getting that content produced.
It's outrageous.
But the volume the guy puts out is literally everywhere. Everyone talks about him because you see him everywhere. The volume of his content. So does volume play into it?
Yeah, volume. People always say quality over quantity. That's true to an extent, but always quantity until the quality drops. So if you and I are putting out the same, let's just presume for argument's sake, we're putting out the same quality of content. Subjective, but let's say we are. If one of us is putting out 10 times more or even double the amount, that's simply more opportunities to reinforce your message or grow a brand. So I just see it as every time you put a piece of content out, it's another opportunity. So as long as you can maintain a decent quality in those, I would scale the quantity as high as you can possibly go, for sure. And, not every piece of content has to be groundbreakingly insightful. It can just be a little nugget people can take away. You don't have to change the world with every piece of content. But yeah, there's definitely merit in upping the quantity of content you produce.
Yeah, I think that's another. There's so many interesting points with this, but I think that's another massive thing is you never know what's going to resonate. And a lot of the time when you sit there and you think, oh, fuck, this is going to change the world, this 4,000 word blog that I've just written, I've put my heart and soul into it, and it gets absolute crickets. And then you just randomly put up a tweet and someone goes, fuck, that was amazing. Like, how did you come up with that? Like, I know I was on the toilet and I just tweeted it. That's the thing that resonates. Like now you're getting podcast interviews about this thing that you just tweeted randomly. So you never, I think that's really, really important to understand. You never know what's going to resonate. So just putting stuff out and getting used to just having a cadence and go like every day I put at least a piece out, or I'm doing that batching, and every day something's going out. You never know if it's going to be that 5-word tweet that you put that's going to resonate, or the 4,000 word thing that you've put your heart and soul into and got this amazing production value. So I think that's a really key point as well, is just kind of just do it and just get stuff out there, because you don't know what's actually going to work.
Yeah, we've all had one of those, the toilet tweets or something that took us 30 seconds, but it's the most popular post of the month. It's a classic.
Yeah, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. And then once I got my content, so sort of moving through, I know we're sort of referencing a framework that you sort of posted up on LinkedIn in one of your amazing, engaging LinkedIn posts. So do go check Sam out, Sam G. Winsbury on LinkedIn. I'll post all this stuff in the link so you can go check him out. The third part of this, I've got my positioning. I'm getting some good content. I've got my marketing piece going. My engine's cranking. Now, that third piece you talk about is amplification. So what does that piece look like? I've got a message out, and I want to amplify that message. Is that where you sort of talk about public relations and that side of things sort of starting to step into the equation?
Yeah, spot on. So amplification really is about scaling your reach by featuring in front of pre-built targeted audiences that other people essentially own. So you're using audiences in publications that other people have already built up around a specific topic to get your message in front of a specific group of people. Let's say you go to a blog that writes articles about helping startups improve their SEO, right? And it's got 10,000 or 100,000 readers every month. You can bet pretty good money that if you're an SEO agency for startup brands, that a lot of your potential audience or target customers are probably reading that blog. So that's a really nice opportunity for you to go to this place and write an article for them, potentially feature it on that blog and get access to that audience that are highly engaged and highly targeted. So it's a really nice way to scale what you've already done in this kind of social content phase up to a new level and reach new audiences all at once. I always like to say if the marketing side, the content is the difference between a 5-figure personal brand and a 6-figure personal brand, getting this amplification piece right is often the difference between the 6-figure personal brands and the 7-figure ones. So it's taking you to that next level.
So you're kind of flipping, you're getting that, like we're talking about volume in content, you're kind of getting volume of audience right at this piece. I'm going from my network might be 1,000 people or 10,000 people who actually follow and engage with what I do. But like I said, if I can go on a podcast that gets 1 million views, if I can get on Rogan, right, that's going to amplify my message. But just thinking through the way that you kind of structured this framework, that kind of makes sense that they kind of layer on each other, that I'm less likely to get really good amplified appearances if I don't have a brand, I don't have a clear positioning, I don't stand for something that they can go, Sam's going to come on and talk about how to amplify your personal brand as an agency owner. That's a very clear thing that I go, perfect, he's great for my show, bring him on. If Sam was a marketing guy who's going to talk about marketing, so that could be interesting, but it's much less like now I've got a really engaging topic that we can dig into and kind of deep dive. So I think it feels like those things kind of stack on each other.
Yeah, and it makes it more difficult to do, but that's actually a good thing, right? So you need really strong positioning to be kind of worthy of being featured on these podcasts or blogs or whatever. You need a good social presence to make that brand that you're trying to build clear, which means it's more work on the front end. It's harder to land these appearances right, but that also pays dividends when you do land them, because anyone that does land kind of worthwhile features in these places is seen as someone worthy of being featured. There's a lot of credibility that comes with that. If someone is have seen you as, if they're worth their time, if they're worth featuring you on their blog, that's not as easy to do. Anyone can post on LinkedIn. This is that accessibility piece that we mentioned earlier. Anyone that can post on Twitter, anyone can start a YouTube channel, but not many people can appear on Joe Rogan, for example. There's got to be a lot of credibility to you to actually do that. So there's this authority credibility piece in there as well. But yeah, you've definitely, in our experience anyway, got to nail the positioning and the social side in order to land them.
Yeah, it certainly gives you a different caliber, I guess, when you get to that. If I can get on but just the idea that somebody is interested enough in what I do to interview me and have me on a podcast says something about me. And obviously then what you do on that podcast needs to be interesting. But just the fact that you've been invited on and you've got a platform now for your message says something. It's this kind of attributed authority. It's purely because someone's brought me on their show and they've interviewed me. I now have that authority of they interviewed me, they brought me on their show. So there's something about me that is credible.
Yeah. So it's a halo effect, really, a lot of the time. Not getting authority from somebody else. So, and at the same time, putting you in front of a huge audience of a targeted niche. So it's really, really useful.
Yeah, awesome stuff, man. I think it's really, really key stuff that, again, we said right up front that particularly agency owners can kind of miss, and we focus on agency content, which can look a bit generic out there in the world of content. It's like, hey, we do this and we build great websites and we're great at SEO and here's some client results. I think that stuff's important, probably plays a part in that content cadence. But I sort of refer, when I was thinking about the show today, I was thinking about the number of times that we have client meetings and the thing that connects to the client isn't, hey, we're amazing at SEO. It's, oh, my dog walks through in the background and they go, oh my God, I've got a dog as well. And you talk about that thing. And that's the thing that they go, I like this person, I trust them. And now I want to shop with them. I want to buy with them, because we've had this personal thing where you talk about, a business partner talk about their kids in the hospital. Oh, my kid had this as well. Or we connect over having something personal is the thing that generally kind of tips the balance in a lot of those sales conversations. So that same thing applies in content, right? When we're not necessarily face to face with someone, but it can be that personal thing that I see an accurate representation of who Sam is, who Chris is. I go, oh, he's a dog person, I'm a dog person. Now we're kind of subliminally connected on this level that I might not even be aware of, but I want to follow you more because you might talk about your dog again and that interests me. Right? That's maybe like a tiny thing and a weird example, but the number of times that helps at that pointy end of sales, I think that's really what you're talking about here, is bringing that kind of personality up front, connecting with people as human beings, but then also going, I'm a human being, but I'm really good in business as well.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's very much the same as how you do it if you were meeting with someone. You might, go for a coffee with someone, they bring their dog and you build rapport over their dog, or you do it on a call. The dog walks into the room. You're just doing that at scale. You're making that publicly available, en masse. And obviously never underestimate the power of getting on a call with someone that already knows who you are, likes you and trusts you. And you don't have to do all of the convincing on a call. It's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, I think that's a super, super important outcome of all this stuff. Why should I do this? I think in one of your posts you mentioned some of the reasons I might want to do this. So you mentioned here that people are willing to pay 13.57 times more for someone that is a leading expert in an industry. That's not an insignificant number. If I can charge $13,000 instead of $1,000 for a service, purely, like you said, so I've kind of pre-sold someone subconsciously. They know who I am before we've even spoken. That gives me a semblance of authority and credibility and all this stuff, right? They're more likely to want to buy from me. That's not an insignificant number. You also say 82% of people trust a company when their senior management team are visible and active on social. Again, not insignificant numbers. Is that something you see across the board?
Yeah, massively. And I think one of the key things there is senior management team. I think a huge missed opportunity, particularly for agencies over the next kind of 10, 15 years, is going to be not just not building personal brand for the founder or the CEO, but actually not having their wider leadership team or even the whole team building personal brands. Doesn't just have to be one person at top. The more people that you can get doing this within your agency, the better. We even have it in ours. We encourage the teams to do it. It makes more sense for us because we're a personal branding agency, but we have 11 people within the company that actively build their personal brands. July alone, we had 3.7 million views. Talent frequently coming to us saying that they want to work with our team, and the leads are good from it. I can assure you of that. So it's this translates, right? Rather than just having one person do it, get as many people as you can as well.
I mean, that's a real world value proposition right there. If I can get 3.7 million people seeing my business,
exactly.
If I convert 0.1% of them, I'm doing pretty well a month.
Yeah. And then it's great for the client relationships because the client hasn't just seen you over the last 3 months before they've become a client. They've seen your whole team. And now once you've kind of onboarded them into the company and they're working with other people, they're not going, I just want to work with the founder. They're the one I trust. They actually trust the whole company as well. They kind of get the authority from the whole company, trust the whole company as well. So from a client relationship standpoint, it's super powerful.
Yeah, I love that. And how we could probably talk for an hour and a half here. How in that team structure, and we talked very early on about the checklist of things. Is there obviously there's a company culture that I want to explore and sort of show across that team? Like, here's me, like I talk about dogs, my business partner talks about cats, and our head of sales talks about kids, right? That's the personal stuff that we talk about. But then I'm talking about, say I'm the strategic person in the business. So I'm going to talk more about strategy. CEO is going to talk about maybe business growth. And the sales guy is going to talk about sales conversions and sales tactics. Is that kind of how you start to split that out? So there's a common thread that everyone has, but then you're putting personality and that accurate representation of the person on top.
Yeah, exactly right. So you want to have kind of individual nuance based on what each person is doing within the business, where their areas of specialism are, where their personality is. You want to have those nuances, but there also needs to be kind of an overall umbrella message or a collective theme so that you're not completely contradicting each other. It doesn't look great when two people of the same company are saying things that are completely different. So it's important to have an understanding of what does the company actually stand for. But then once you've got that kind of umbrella idea or that framework, you should encourage people to have the personal nuance that makes it different. It doesn't just sound like one person repeating themselves on 10 different accounts.
Yeah. In terms of accounts, just to wrap, where are you seeing the best results for this stuff? Is it LinkedIn because that's more B2B? Is it Instagram? Is it Facebook? Is it TikTok? Or does it really come down to who the business is and where their audience is at?
Yeah, it depends on the business and where the audience are for sure. I think for most agencies that we've worked with at the moment, LinkedIn is kind of low-hanging fruit. The organic reach there is really, really high at the moment. So it's very plausible to reach huge audiences and attract people into your network quite quickly. So LinkedIn, definitely low-hanging fruit. It's kind of a no-brainer, really. TikTok, Instagram, with the introduction of Reels, are doing reasonably well as well. And then podcast appearances more and more. Quite ironic that I say that as I'm on one.
It's a great idea. You should go on something.
Appearing on podcasts is nice because of the richness of the content that you get from them. Kind of, there's a deeper level of engagement, I think, with the audience than just a tweet, for example. But yeah, definitely, if I had to pick one, LinkedIn.
Yeah, podcast repurposed for LinkedIn sounds good. And that's why what I love about a podcast, and what I particularly love about video, is you can't hide. It's harder to hide. And you talk about value, you talk about being an expert, you talk about having an accurate representation, but also actually having expertise and having skills and being able to kind of rap on stuff, right, and talk about stuff. That really comes out in a podcast where, like, this whole thing we've shot for 40 minutes, and we just kind of wrap through. Like, I can clearly see that you are an expert in what you're doing, because you can talk about it and you can expand on it and you can give examples. That's very, very different from, I'm going to think about a tweet for 4 hours and then post the perfect thing, and you don't know what's gone into. If you can do it on the fly, that's for me where I can demonstrate that I have genuine skill and expertise. So yeah, I think you bang on there. That particularly that podcast video format goes a long way to that credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Never underestimate the value of actually being good at what you do in personal branding. It's the best personal branding.
That does help. That does help, actually being good. Yeah.
Get great results, be good at what you do, and have a body of work behind you, and you'll stand out amongst probably 80% of your competition.
Yeah, that comes back to reputation, right? And it's something that takes a long time to build up, but it can disappear overnight.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much. I say we could probably keep rapping for the next hour and a half. We'll try and wrap the show up because people are busy. If people want to find out more about you, get connected with you, where are some of the best places for them to come and find you?
Yeah, so I frequently share content pretty much every day on LinkedIn around personal branding, but also agency building as well. So any agent owners wanting to kind of go from a position of not knowing what to do with their personal brand to being pretty comfortable with it, do feel free to check me out there, Sam G. Winsbury. I also write quite frequently at samwinsbury.co.uk if you want to go slightly longer form and dive a little bit deeper.
Amazing. And as always, I'll drop those links in the show notes so you can pound one of those links and go get connected to Sam. Sam, thank you for staying up. I know it's as you can see in your background, it's nice and late there in the UK. I appreciate you staying up and hanging out with us. It's been super valuable. Really enjoyed the conversation.
All good. Thanks so much for having me on, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Really, really valuable episode. I think there's a lot of takeaways. Watch this a few times, take lots of notes, get this stuff built into your profiles. And you'll start getting that amplification, start to really build your network, build your profile, and get some clients off the back of it. Thanks for tuning in. Been an awesome show. Sam, thanks for being here, and we'll catch you all on the next one. Cheers.